CMQ investors, it's another day, and it's another day that Alibaba is down. I've been going back to some of my favorite investing books of all time. I consider these classic investing books that have helped me just think more rationally about investing. And today, with Alibaba now in the $80 range, I've come to the Warren Buffett Portfolio, and I want to share with you one page here that has, I'd say it was one of the most kind of like epiphany moments that I've had as an investor when I was just teaching myself the ways of the great investors. And it's about risk. So I'm just going to read you this page. We'll talk about it, but there's so much value here, and I hope it's helpful to you. Here we go. Recall that in modern portfolio theory, risk is defined by the volatility of the share price. But throughout his career, Buffett has always perceived a drop in share prices as an opportunity to make additional money. If anything, a dip in price actually reduces the risk Buffett takes. He points out, quote, "For owners of a business, and that's the way we think of shareholders, the academic's definition of risk is far off the mark, so much so that it produces absurdities, I should say. Buffett has a different definition of risk. Risk is the possibility of harm or injury, and that is a factor of the intrinsic value risk of the business, not the price behavior of the stock. The real risk, Buffett says, is whether after-tax returns from an investment will give him, or the investor, at least as much purchasing power as he had to begin with, plus a modest rate of interest on that initial stake." That's so critical, guys, because sometimes we forget what our actual goal is when we invest our money. And that's it. I'm going to read that again. This is the DJ Bring It Back moment. The real risk, Buffett says, is whether after-tax returns from an investment will give him and an investor at least as much purchasing power as he had to begin with, plus a modest rate of interest on that initial stake. In Buffett's view, harm or injury comes from misjudging the four primary factors that determine the future profits of your investment, plus the uncontrollable, unpredictable effect of taxes and inflation. And note how he said unpredictable here. And this next part, this last paragraph here, it makes me think of Alibaba. Risk, for Buffett, is inextricably linked to an investor's time horizon. If you buy a stock today, he explains, with the intention of selling it tomorrow, then you have entered into a risky transaction. The odds of predicting whether share prices will be up or down in a short period are no greater than the odds of predicting the toss of a coin. You will lose half of the time. However, says Buffett, if you extend your time horizon out to several years, the probability of its being a risky transaction declines meaningfully, assuming, of course, that you've made a sensible purchase. Quote, "If you ask me to assess the risk of buying Coca-Cola this morning and selling it tomorrow morning," Buffett says, "I'd say that's a very risky transaction." But in Buffett's way of thinking, buying Coca-Cola this morning and holding it for 10 years carries zero risk. Again, this comes from Robert Hagstrom's book, The Warren Buffett Portfolio. This was a book that actually I learned about through one of Charlie Munger's recommendations at a past Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting. Excellent book. This is probably one of my top 3 all time. But let's think about that in terms of Alibaba. Now, I'm not saying that Alibaba, there's no risk over a 10-year period. I don't want anyone to think that. And you should only invest in something that makes sense for you, not just because, I'm talking about it. This is never financial advice. If you notice, by the way, I have a little sweat on my head, and that's because Alibaba, it's because Alibaba is now below $90 per share. So I might actually get this tattooed on the back of my hand so I can read it all day, because it's causing me a little bit of anxiety here. But I just think this is so relevant in just the sense that, when you extend the time horizon, the risk goes down. And I think for me as a long-term shareholder, or as someone who strives to be a long-term shareholder, someone who tries to do things to keep myself from panic selling and, making these errors that interrupt the compounding process, or, falling for these psychological traps that I've, learned all about over the last several years, whether it's, the disposition effect or something like that. Reading this is so critical. And it's one of the reasons why I find Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger to be, some of my investing heroes, because they looked at everything. I've said this before, I think, whether to myself or maybe on the podcast, but they disregarded the dogma of the day. They're willing to look at what everyone thinks is true and reach their own conclusions. And oftentimes, or at least sometimes, their conclusion is the exact opposite of what the professional is saying, or in this case, the academic is saying. So very relevant. I hope that is helpful to you. And again, I highly recommend this book, The Warren Buffett Portfolio by Robert Hagstrom. I've learned so much from it. If you're interested in something like Charlie Munger's multidisciplinary framework, this book does a great job of showing how the investment process is it's truly multidisciplinary. It requires that you see the world through the lenses of multiple disciplines and not just in this one, kind of narrow context. So again, Alibaba right now, if I was trying to make a quick buck and say, hey, I'm going to buy it today because it's low and I have to sell it in a week, that would be extremely risky. But if I believe that Alibaba has a long-term future and I can hold on for, let's just say 5 to 10 years. We don't even have to say all the way to 10 years. That risk, I believe, goes down substantially. The real risk right now is me panic selling. And that's why some of the more recent videos and podcasts are all about, different ways that I am trying to keep myself from doing that, because it's one of the easiest mistakes to make for us as individual investors. But anyway, I hope this is useful to you. If you like this video, please subscribe, hit the thumbs up, do all that stuff that the real seasoned YouTubers tell you to do. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you watching. My name is Chris Franco. This has been CMQ Investing. We'll talk soon.